everyone. Today I'm going to be doing a short meditation over the passage of Romans chapter 3, verses 9 through 20. But before we start, I would like to thank God for another day and giving me this opportunity to speak His words to you. So now let's read today's passage again, found in the book of Romans chapter 3, verses 9 through 20. What then, are we any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under the power of sin. As it is written, there is no one who is righteous, not even one. There is no one who has understanding. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. There is no one who shows kindness. There is not even one. Their throats are open graves. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of vipers is under their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery are in their paths. The way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For no human being will be justified in His sight by deeds prescribed by the law, for through the law comes the knowledge of sin. Okay, so now I'd like to get into some background information about Romans. Paul, as we know, has written many letters in the New Testament, one being Romans. Paul had a different intention for each letter that he wrote. Paul was in the city of Corinth in the mid-50s AD while he was composing the specific letter of Romans. Paul, being an apostle, had one goal in mind, which is to elucidate that salvation is offered through the gospel of Jesus Christ. More specifically, Paul wrote to the Christian church at Rome, a place where Paul was planning on visiting on his way to Spain in the near future. So now looking into our chapter 3 as a whole, you see that the Jews questioned Paul about some of his teachings, namely concerning sin in the law, as well as God's judgment of Jews and Gentiles. So now looking at verse 9 of chapter 3, it states, "What then, are we any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that both Jews and Greeks are under the power of sin." Okay, so Paul was actually Jewish by birth and by heritage, and that's stated in Philippians chapter 3, 4 through 6. So when Paul is saying we Jews, he is literally meaning him and the Jews. The Jews by nature are not holier than or more right with God than the pagans or the Greeks. And Paul is demonstrating that not only the pagans, and the pagans being the non-believers of the Christian faith, but also the Jews are under sin and condemnation. So looking at that phrase, under sin, we see that phrase in the Bible so many times. It is a very powerful phrase because it speaks in the way of, or in the context of us being slaves to sin. By human nature, everyone knows what it's like to be a slave to sin, both Jews, both the Greeks, and especially us. So I think it's important to look at these verses and realize that in a way, even though these letters were written many, many years ago, Paul is not only speaking to the people of Rome, but also to us. So if we look at ourselves in the perspective of the Jews, they believe that they are better than these pagans, but Paul reassures them that they are not. We can also look at ourselves as the pagans, because even though they are not believers in the Christian faith, we are more like them than we are not. Because oftentimes we look at Christianity as a safety ticket, or maybe like a wall or a safeguard around us. Simply saying that we are Christians and boasting about that relationship with God, that's wrong. That is, the intent to belittle others is wrong, because we are just as convicted and guilty of sin as those who do not consider themselves Christian. It's hard to admit that, but we are slaves to sin. We stand guilty, we stand convicted, and we are held accountable to God. So I love reading Paul's letters because he's very blunt with his purpose and reasoning for what he says. He convicts us and he reminds us that we are not righteous just because we consider ourselves Christian, or we're not automatically righteous just because we are Christians. This reason for this passage should not be missed. So furthermore, when we're looking into verse 10, Paul states, as it is written, there is no one who is righteous, not even one. There is no one who has understanding. There is no one who seeks God. Again, Paul is re-emphasizing to the Jews that they don't know God, or in fact seek God in a Christian manner. This is another reminder to us that we are forfeiting our relationship with God, even though we are not righteous. Even we are not righteous. Paul goes on through verse 13 through 17. It states, their throats are open graves. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of vipers is under their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery are in their paths, and the way of peace they have not known. So Paul is explaining the substantial and pronounced extent of this unrighteousness and actions of sin from the pagans and the Jews. So when I was reading this, I was thinking this is really dramatic. The way Paul says it is very poetic. But as dramatic and poetic as Paul makes it seem, it's actually an understatement, because he's only briefly explaining the pagans and the Jews' shortcomings. Paul is so passionate about bringing people to God, so he makes sure we feel convicted of our shortcomings. And what caught my eye was when Paul was saying in verse number 18 of chapter 3, there's no fear of God before their eyes. So I used to hear this all the time from my teachers, my parents, Achin, reminding us the importance of fearing the Lord. And I didn't understand, because I just didn't get the point of being scared of a God that we are following. But the Bible urges us to fear God. And that is so important. It's something that we miss oftentimes as Christians. It is stated in Proverbs chapter 1, verses 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So by that verse, in order to understand the extent of our sin, in order to be knowledgeable of our shortcomings and flaws, we have to fear the Lord, for that is the beginning of wisdom. So Paul goes on to say through 19 and 20, now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For no human being will be justified in his sight by deeds prescribed by the law, for through the law comes the knowledge of sin. So through 19 and 20, it's saying that we must be silenced, the whole world must be held accountable. So throughout this passage, Paul kind of puts a mirror in front of us and forces us to reflect prayerfully and take a look at ourselves. We are so undeserving of God's grace, but it's important we ask for his mercy, even though we are not worthy of it. So during this Lent season, we are constantly asked what we are giving up, whether that be meat, sweets, social media. I know I'm asked that multiple times. But Paul kind of puts on my heart that maybe it isn't something I have to give up, rather something I need to give more into, whether that be giving into my spiritual relationship with God, or whether that be spending more time talking to God each day. This time is for prayer and building a firm relationship with God. So Paul kind of convicts us of these shortcomings as Christians. And this Lenten time is for us to use this time to realize these shortcomings and make an effort to reflect and better ourselves as Christians and God's people. Again, I would like to thank God for this opportunity to speak his words to you. I pray that I've spoken to someone today and given you a chance to reflect as Christians. I pray that we use this Lenten season to reaffirm our faith as Christians, and I pray that everyone is staying safe and healthy during this time. With that being said, I would like to conclude my meditation and devotion today, and I pray that God continues to work through us and live through us in our everyday lives. Thank you.